I was lying at the bottom of the stairs, blood pooling beneath my head, when I heard my daughter-in-law tell the paramedics I fell. My son nodded along, but she had pushed me, and I couldn't. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Janet Morrison, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be telling this story. For most of my life, I was just an ordinary woman who believed in the goodness of family. I spent 32 years teaching second grade at Riverside Elementary, watching hundreds of children grow from shy 6-year-olds into confident young readers. Every morning, I'd arrive an hour early to prepare my classroom, making sure each desk had a fresh pencil and an encouraging note for any child who might be struggling. The other teachers used to joke that I collected kids like some people collected stamps, but I couldn't help myself. Every child who walked through my door became part of my extended family. When my husband, Robert, passed away 8 years ago from a sudden heart attack, my world shattered into pieces I didn't know how to put back together. We'd been married for 39 years, and he was my everything. Robert used to leave me little notes in my lunch bag, even after decades of marriage. The morning he died, I found one that said, "Janet, you make every day worth living." I still carry that note in my wallet, worn soft from all the times I've unfolded it when I needed to feel his presence. After Robert's death, my eldest son Michael insisted I move in with him and his wife Sarah. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that big house," he said, his eyes full of concern. "The kids need their grandmother close by." How could I refuse? Michael was always my sensitive child, the one who brought home injured birds and cried during sad movies. His younger sisters, Patricia and Linda, lived across the country with their own families, but Michael had stayed close to home, always the devoted son. I sold the house Robert and I had built our dreams in, using most of the money to help Michael pay off his mortgage. It's an investment in family, I told myself, even as I packed away 40 years of memories into boxes labeled garage and storage. Sarah seemed grateful at first, hugging me and saying how wonderful it would be to have live-in help with their 3 children. Tommy, age 12, Jessica, 10, and little Benjamin, just 6 years old. Those grandchildren became my new purpose. Every afternoon when they burst through the door after school, my heart would swell with joy. Tommy would tell me about his science projects while I helped him build volcano models at the kitchen table. Jessica would curl up beside me as I taught her to knit, her small fingers fumbling with the needles just as her father's once had. And Benjamin, sweet Benjamin, would climb into my lap for story time, always requesting. The same book about a brave little rabbit that his father had loved at that age. I threw myself into being the perfect grandmother and house helper. Sunday dinners became my signature, with pot roast so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork, mashed potatoes whipped with real cream, and green beans from the small garden I'd started in the corner of their backyard. I'd wake at dawn to pack special lunches for the children, always including homemade cookies and notes reminding them how special they were. The PTA mothers knew me by name because I never missed a bake sale, always arriving with 3 dozen cupcakes decorated to match the season. But this isn't a story about the joy of being a grandmother. This is about how the people you trust most can harbor the darkest intentions, and how a simple fall down the stairs would reveal a conspiracy that nearly cost me everything. Life in Michael's house had settled into a comfortable rhythm that reminded me of the peaceful years before Robert's death. Each morning began at 6 o'clock sharp, my internal clock still set to teacher's hours, even though I'd been retired for 3 years. I'd slip quietly downstairs in my terry cloth slippers, the ones Jessica had given me last Christmas with little embroidered roses on them, and start the coffee brewing. The kitchen would fill with that rich aroma while I prepared Michael's lunch for work, always including an extra apple because he never ate enough fruit. By 6:30, I'd be in my little garden corner, tending to the tomatoes and herbs I'd planted along the back fence. Sarah had initially protested about losing yard space, but when fresh basil and oregano started appearing in her favorite dishes, she stopped complaining. The morning dew would still be clinging to the leaves as I picked what I needed for dinner, the sun just beginning to paint the sky pink and gold. Mrs. Chen from next door would often wave from her own garden, and we'd exchange knowing smiles. Two old women who understood that gardens were about more than just vegetables. The children would tumble downstairs by 7. Benjamin always last with his hair sticking up in impossible directions. I'd have their breakfast ready, scrambled eggs with cheese for Tommy, who was trying to build muscle for basketball season, whole wheat toast with strawberry jam for Jessica, cut diagonally just the way she liked it, and chocolate chip pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse for Benjamin, though Sarah didn't need to know about those extra chocolate chips I'd sneak in. While they ate, I'd check their homework one last time, slip lunch money into pockets, and tie shoes that had mysteriously come undone overnight. After the morning rush, the house would quiet down, and I'd have my own breakfast at the kitchen table with my crossword puzzle and a second cup of coffee. This was my thinking time, when I'd plan the day's activities. Tuesdays meant grocery shopping at Kroger, where I'd spent 2 hours comparing prices and using coupons I'd clipped from Sunday's paper. I'd saved the family nearly $2,000 last year with those coupons, though Sarah never seemed to notice. Thursdays were for volunteering at the food bank downtown, where I'd sort donations alongside other retirees who understood that being useful didn't stop at 65. Afternoons were my favorite time. The school bus would rumble up at 3:15, and I'd be waiting at the door with fresh-baked snacks. We'd gather around the kitchen table, homework spread out like important documents, and I'd help them navigate through math problems and book reports. Tommy struggled with algebra, but I'd found that using basketball statistics helped him understand variables. Jessica was writing a report about butterflies, so we'd spent last weekend creating a beautiful poster with pictures we'd printed from the library computer. Evenings followed a predictable pattern. I'd start dinner at 5, timing everything so it would be ready when Michael got home at 6:30. Sarah usually arrived later, around 7, always looking tired from her job at the real estate office. We'd eat together at the dining room table, the children chattering about their day while Michael asked about their grades and activities. I'd watch my son with pride, seeing Robert's kindness in the way he listened to each child's story with genuine interest. After dinner, while Sarah and Michael retreated to watch television, I'd supervise bath time for Benjamin and read him stories, doing all the voices until he giggled himself sleepy. Then I'd knit in the living room armchair, the one they designated as Grandma's chair, working on Christmas presents or baby blankets for the church donation drive. By 9 o'clock, I'd head to my room, the converted den at the back of the house, where I'd read a chapter of my mystery novel before drifting off to sleep, feeling useful and loved. This was my life, predictable and peaceful, filled with the small joys of family and purpose. I had no reason to suspect that anything was about to change. The first crack in my peaceful existence appeared on an otherwise ordinary Thursday evening in early January. I was folding laundry in the living room while Benjamin played with his toy trucks at my feet when Sarah walked in carrying a manila folder. She settled into the couch across from me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between concern and calculation that made my stomach flutter unexpectedly. "Janet, we need to talk about your insurance policies," she said, her voice sweeter than the honey I'd drizzled on Benjamin's toast that morning. "Michael mentioned you have several, and we just want to make sure everything is properly organized. In case of any emergency." The question caught me off guard. In 8 years of living here, Sarah had never shown interest in my personal affairs. "Oh, they're all filed away, safely," I replied, continuing to match Michael's socks. Robert was very particular about keeping things organized. Sarah leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the folder. "But shouldn't Michael know where everything is? As your son, I mean. We'd hate for important documents to get lost or forgotten. Maybe we could go through them together this weekend?" Benjamin crashed his trucks together with explosive sound effects, and I was grateful for the distraction. "I suppose that makes sense," I said slowly, though something in my chest tightened. "I'll think about it." Over the next few days, I noticed other things that seemed just slightly off, like a picture hanging crooked that you pass a dozen times before realizing it's bothering you. Sarah started joining me for my morning coffee, something she'd never done in all our years together. She'd ask casual questions about my retirement pension from the school district, wondering aloud if it was enough to live comfortably. When I mentioned it was quite generous thanks to my 32 years of service, her eyes lit up in a way that made me unconsciously pull my cardigan tighter. Michael's behavior changed too, though more subtly. My son, who usually looked me directly in the eye when we talked, started finding reasons to avoid my gaze. During Sunday dinner, when I asked about his work at the accounting firm, he mumbled something about tough times and quickly changed the subject. Later, when I offered to help with any financial struggles they might be having, he practically snapped at me, saying they were fine in a tone that suggested anything but. The whispered conversations started the following week. I'd walk into the kitchen to find Sarah and Michael huddled over his laptop, their voices dropping to nothing the moment I appeared. "Just work stuff, Mom," Michael would say, closing the computer with a sharp click. But work discussions had never required such secrecy before, and the way Sarah's eyes followed me as I moved around the kitchen made me feel like a stranger in what had become my home. One afternoon, I came home early from the food bank with a headache and found Sarah in my room. She jumped when she saw me, quickly closing my desk drawer. "Looking for aspirin," she explained, though the medicine cabinet in the bathroom was where we kept all the medications. "I thought you might have some in here." She brushed past me, leaving behind the faint scent of her expensive perfume and a feeling of violation that lingered long after she'd gone. Mrs. Chen noticed the change too. During our morning garden talks, she mentioned seeing Sarah carrying boxes from my room to the garage. "Spring cleaning?" she'd asked innocently. But it was January, and I hadn't authorized any cleaning of my possessions. When I checked later, I found several photo albums had been moved, and my filing cabinet showed signs of tampering. The folders were still alphabetical, but faced the wrong direction, as if someone had pulled them out and hastily replaced them. The strangest moment came when Sarah suddenly suggested I should take more walks and be more active. This from a woman who had previously complained about me gardening too early in the morning. "The stairs are good exercise," she said, watching me climb them one evening. "You should use them more often." I spent the next 2 weeks constructing elaborate explanations for everything I'd noticed, building a wall of rationalization brick by brick against the growing unease in my chest. Lying in bed at night, I'd stare at the ceiling and tell myself stories that made sense, stories that didn't involve my son and his wife harboring dark intentions toward the woman who had changed their diapers and kissed their scraped knees. Sarah's sudden interest in my finances? Perhaps she was trying to be a responsible daughter-in-law. Maybe she'd read an article about elderly parents needing help with financial planning. I remembered her mentioning once that her own mother had died young, leaving a mess of disorganized papers that took months to sort through. She was probably just trying to spare Michael that burden. Yes, that had to be it. She was being thoughtful in her own awkward way. The whispered conversations were easily explained, too. Michael's accounting firm had been in the news lately about potential layoffs. Of course he'd be stressed, discussing options with his wife while trying to protect his mother from worry. That's what Robert would have done, shoulder the burden silently, rather than cause me anxiety. Michael had inherited his father's protective nature, the closed laptop, the hushed voices. They were shields, not secrets. Finding Sarah in my room still bothered me, but I forced myself to remember that she'd been suffering from migraines lately. The afternoon light in my room was softer than anywhere else in the house because of the oak tree outside my window. Maybe she really had been looking for aspirin, hoping the dimmer light would ease her pain. The fact that she was near my desk could have been coincidence. After all, in 8 years, she'd never taken anything from me. I even rationalized the suggestions about exercise and using the stairs more often. At my last doctor's appointment, Dr. Phillips had mentioned that weight-bearing exercise was important for preventing osteoporosis. Sarah must have overheard Michael mentioning it. Her comments about staying active were probably genuine concern for my health. The way she watched me climb the stairs wasn't calculating. It was worry. She wanted to make sure I was steady, that I wasn't developing mobility issues. When doubt crept in during my morning coffee, I'd remind myself of the good moments. Just last week, Sarah had complimented my pot roast, even asked for the recipe. Would someone with ill intentions care about my cooking secrets? And Michael had hugged me extra long on Tuesday morning before work, telling me he loved me. Surely that wasn't the embrace of a son planning something sinister. I threw myself into being even more helpful, as if my usefulness could dispel the shadows gathering at the edges of my vision. I reorganized the pantry, labeling everything with Sarah's label maker. I taught Benjamin to tie his shoes using the bunny ear method, spending hours practicing until his little fingers could manage it alone. I helped Jessica with her science fair project about the solar system, staying up late to paint Jupiter's great red spot just the right shade of crimson. During my volunteer shift at the food bank, I mentioned my concerns to Martha, another regular volunteer. She laughed, patting my arm with her weathered hand. "Honey, we all get paranoid as we age. I thought my daughter was plotting against me when she suggested I get hearing aids. Turned out she was just tired of repeating herself." We laughed together, and I felt foolish for my suspicions. Even Mrs. Chen's observations could be explained away. The boxes Sarah moved were probably Christmas decorations being returned to storage. The fact that my photo albums had been moved meant nothing. Sarah was always reorganizing, trying to maximize space in their cluttered garage. By the end of those 2 weeks, I had almost convinced myself completely. Almost. But there was still that small voice, the teacher's instinct that had always told me when a student was lying about forgotten homework or playground fights. That voice whispered warnings in the quiet moments. But I wrapped myself in denial like a warm blanket, choosing comfort over caution. The morning of January 28th started like any other, except Sarah had left early for a real estate conference, and Michael was home sick with the flu. I brought him soup and tea, mothering him the way I had when he was 7 with chickenpox, and he seemed more like his old self, grateful and gentle. While he slept, I decided to catch up on laundry, including the jacket Sarah had worn the previous evening that she'd draped over the kitchen chair. As I checked the pockets before washing, a habit from years of saving toys, crayons, and homework from the machine, my fingers found a folded piece of paper. I almost tossed it in the pile of receipts and gum wrappers on the counter, but the letterhead caught my eye. Mutual Life Insurance Company. My name was printed clearly in the middle of the page. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it completely. It was a benefit statement for my life insurance policy, the one Robert had purchased years ago. But the beneficiary information had been circled in red pen, and someone had written $500,000 in the margin with multiple underlines. Below that, in what was definitely Sarah's handwriting, were the words, "Accidental death, Chow double." I stood frozen in the laundry room, the washing machine humming its familiar rhythm while my world tilted, off its axis. Why would Sarah have this document? I kept all my insurance papers locked in my filing cabinet. The only way she could have gotten this was by going through my personal files. Probably during that day, I caught her in my room. With shaking legs, I made my way to my room and checked the filing cabinet. The lock showed tiny scratches around the keyhole that hadn't been there before, the kind of marks left by someone picking a lock with a paper clip or bobby pin. Inside, my insurance folder was still there, but several documents were missing, including the original of what I'd found in Sarah's pocket. I sat on my bed trying to process what this meant, but my investigation couldn't stop there. Something compelled me to check the family computer while Michael slept. Sarah was always forgetting to log out of her accounts, and sure enough, her browser was still open. The history made my blood run cold. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd visited dozens of websites: elderly slip and fall accidents, how to claim life insurance benefits, accidental death insurance payouts, power of attorney for incapacitated parent, and most chillingly, average recovery time, hip fracture, elderly. My medication bottles were my next check. I took blood pressure medicine and a daily vitamin, both clearly labeled. But when I opened them, something felt wrong. The pills looked right, but the vitamin bottle seemed lighter than it should be. I counted them carefully. Based on when I'd filled the prescription, I should have had 42 pills left. There were only 31. The blood pressure medication was also short by nearly a week's worth. I heard Michael stirring upstairs and quickly returned everything to its place, my mind racing. Back in the kitchen, I discovered more evidence I'd previously overlooked. The new rubber mat at the bottom of the stairs, Sarah had insisted on it for safety, was loose at one corner, creating a tripping hazard. The light bulb above the stairs had been replaced with one of lower wattage, making the steps harder to see in the evening. The handrail that had been firmly attached just months ago now wobbled when touched. That evening, while preparing dinner, I overheard Sarah on the phone in the backyard. She must have thought I was upstairs with Benjamin. Through the open window, her words drifted in with the cold January air. "She's healthier than we thought. It needs to look natural. No, I can't wait much longer. The second mortgage payment is due next month, and if she finds out about the gambling..." The conversation stopped abruptly when Tommy called out for help with homework. I continued chopping vegetables, keeping my face neutral when Sarah came inside. "Smells delicious, Janet," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "You're so good to us." That night, I lay awake knowing with terrible certainty that my daughter-in-law was planning something awful, and my son might be part of it. February 3rd was unusually warm for winter, the kind of day that tricks you into thinking spring might come early. I was carrying a basket of clean towels upstairs, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows through the hallway window. The children were at their after-school activities, Tommy at basketball practice, Jessica at dance, and Benjamin at his friend's house for a play date. Michael was still at work, or so I thought. Sarah's voice called from the bottom of the stairs, urgent and sharp. Janet, come quick! There's something wrong with the washing machine, water everywhere." I turned to go back down, the laundry basket heavy in my arms. As I pivoted on the landing, I felt Sarah behind me. When had she come up? Before I could process her presence, 2 hands slammed into my back with shocking force. The basket flew from my arms as I pitched forward, my body twisting desperately to grab the handrail that I already knew was loose. Time slowed to a crystalline crawl. I saw my hand miss the rail by inches. I felt my hip connect with the edge of the 5th step with a crack that seemed to come from somewhere outside my body. My head struck the wall, then the banister, then something else, each impact a lightning bolt of pain. Towels rained down around me like white flags of surrender as I tumbled, my left leg twisting beneath me at an angle that even in my shock I knew was wrong. When I finally came to rest at the bottom, crumpled like a discarded doll, I couldn't move. Through the fog of agony, I heard Sarah on the phone, her voice pitched high with performed hysteria. "Please come quick. My mother-in-law fell down the stairs. She was carrying laundry and just lost her balance. Oh God, there's blood." I tried to speak, to scream that she was lying, but only a weak moan escaped. My vision kept sliding in and out of focus, but I saw Sarah kneel beside me, her face close to mine. "Don't try to talk, Janet," she said loudly, then whispered so only I could hear. "No one will believe you anyway." The paramedics arrived within minutes, their professional voices cutting through my fading consciousness. Elderly female, apparent fall downstairs, possible hip fracture, head trauma. The words floated around me as they stabilized my neck and carefully moved me onto a stretcher. I tried again to tell them the truth, managing to whisper, "pushed," but Sarah quickly interjected. "She's confused, hitting her head like that. She's been a bit unsteady lately. I told her not to carry so much at once." She squeezed my hand in what must have looked like concern, but felt like a warning. Then Michael arrived, and my heart shattered more completely than my hip. He rushed past me to Sarah, pulling her into his arms. "Are you okay? That must have been terrifying to see." "I tried to catch her." Sarah sobbed into his chest. "I was right there, but it happened so fast. She just lost her balance and fell." Michael finally looked at me, and for one moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or guilt. I gathered every ounce of strength left in my broken body and mouthed the word "pushed" directly at him. His face changed, tightening into an expression I'd never seen before. "Mom's getting clumsy in her old age," he said to the paramedics, his voice flat and unfamiliar. "We've been worried about her on these stairs for a while now. Should have done something sooner." As they loaded me into the ambulance, I heard him tell Sarah, "I'll follow in the car. We need to call Patricia and Linda. Let them know Mom had an accident." The word accident was emphasized just enough to make me understand. He knew. My son knew what his wife had done, and he was choosing her, choosing money over his mother. The ambulance doors closed on the image of them standing together on the porch, Sarah's tears already dry, Michael's arm around her shoulders. The morphine drip at the hospital made everything feel distant and underwater, but it couldn't dull the sharp edges of what I discovered over the next 3 weeks. Pain medication loosens tongues, and Sarah, believing I was too drugged to remember her visits, revealed more than she intended. She came alone on the 4th day when Michael was at work. She sat in the visitor's chair, filing her nails and talking, as if I were in a coma instead of simply unable to respond coherently. "You know, Janet, this could have all been avoided if you just died when Robert did. Would have been cleaner that way." The casual cruelty of it made my heart monitor spike, causing a nurse to check in. Sarah immediately transformed into the concerned daughter-in-law, adjusting my blankets with tender care. After the nurse left, Sarah continued her monologue. "Michael doesn't know about all the debts, of course. He thinks it's just the business troubles. Doesn't know about the casino, about Marcus, about how deep I'm in." She laughed, a bitter sound. "100,000 to the casino alone. Another 100 to private lenders who don't accept payment plans. Marcus says his guys won't wait much longer." Marcus. The name meant nothing to me then, but Sarah painted the picture clearly enough. Her affair partner, a man with connections to people who broke fingers over unpaid debts. She'd been meeting him every Thursday while I volunteered at the food bank, using the house that my money had helped pay for to betray my son in every possible way. Michael's business troubles were real, but far worse than I'd imagined. Through Sarah's rambling admissions and overheard conversations between the nurses, I pieced together the truth. His accounting firm hadn't just laid him off, they'd discovered discrepancies in client accounts. Nothing prosecutable, Michael had been careful about that, but enough to destroy his reputation and make him unemployable in the financial sector. They'd been living on Sarah's real estate commissions and credit cards for 6 months, maxing out everything while maintaining the facade of middle-class prosperity. The life insurance policy was their salvation plan. $500,000 plus another $500 for accidental death. $1 million, Janet, Sarah mused during another visit, thinking I was asleep. Enough to pay off everything and start fresh, maybe in Florida. Marcus knows people there. But it went deeper than just the insurance. My nephew David, Patricia's son, who worked at a law firm, visited on day 10. He'd been doing some investigating after finding my fall suspicious. "Aunt Janet," he whispered, checking that we were alone. "I found something. There's a power of attorney document filed with the county, supposedly signed by you, giving Michael complete control of your assets if you're incapacitated." My heart sank. I'd never signed such a document. David continued. "There's more. The house, your name is on it, right? There's a second mortgage taken out 6 months ago. Your signature is on that too. Forgery. My son had forged my signature or allowed his wife to do it. The depth of the betrayal was breathtaking. They'd leveraged my credit, my good name, to borrow another $200,000 that I'd never known about. Where had that money gone? into the black holes of Sarah's gambling and Michael's failed attempts to cover his tracks at work. Mrs. Chen visited on day 15 when I was finally coherent enough to have real conversations. She brought disturbing news. "Janet, I didn't want to worry you, but I've seen that Sarah meeting with a man while you're at the food bank. Younger man drives a black BMW. They were looking at papers about nursing homes last week in your backyard. I could see from my kitchen window." The final piece clicked into place when Sarah made a mistake. She left her phone on my bedside table while helping me to the bathroom, or rather, while pretending to help, while actually causing more pain. A text notification appeared. "Baby, is the old woman dead yet? We need that money now. The house in Florida won't wait, and neither will my contacts." The plan was elegant in its cruelty. Push me down the stairs, collect the insurance, use the power of attorney to liquidate everything else, dump me in the cheapest nursing home they could find, and disappear to Florida with Marcus before anyone could investigate too closely. The night of February 25th was the darkest of my life. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the distant sound of nurses' footsteps in the hallway. My hip throbbed despite the medication, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional agony that consumed me. I lay there, unable to sleep, as memories crashed over me like waves during a storm. I remembered Michael as a baby, colicky and difficult, crying for hours while I walked him around the house, singing lullabies until my voice went hoarse. Robert would find us at 3 a.m, me swaying in the nursery, Michael finally peaceful against my shoulder. "You're a natural mother," he'd whispered, kissing my forehead. I'd given up my master's degree program to stay home with Michael, never regretting it for a moment because he was my world. The tears came then, silent and unstoppable, soaking the hospital pillow. I thought about his first day of kindergarten, how he'd clung to my leg, begging me not to leave. I'd stayed in the parking lot for an hour, crying myself, making sure he was okay. When he'd run out that afternoon, full of stories about new friends and finger painting, his joy had been my joy. Every soccer game, every school play, every birthday party, I'd been there, cheering the loudest, loving the hardest. Where had that little boy gone? When had my sensitive, caring son become someone who could stand by while his mother was deliberately hurt? The Michael who'd made me Mother's Day cards with crooked handwriting and too much glitter. Could he really be the same man who looked me in the eye and called me clumsy while knowing I'd been pushed? I remembered teaching him to ride a bike in Riverside Park, running alongside him, promising I wouldn't let go until he was ready. "I trust you, Mommy," he'd said, pedaling with determination. Now he'd let go of me, sending me tumbling down the stairs and into this nightmare. The betrayal felt like drowning in reverse. Instead of water filling my lungs, it was emptiness, a vacuum where love used to live. Patricia and Linda had called several times, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. How could I explain that their brother was complicit in attempted murder? They had their own families, their own problems. Patricia was dealing with her daughter's eating disorder. Linda's husband had just been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. They didn't need this burden. So I lied, told them I was clumsy, that it was just an accident, hearing myself echo Michael's words and hating myself for protecting him even now. The photo album David had brought sat on my bedside table. I'd asked for it in a moment of masochistic need, and now I couldn't stop looking through it. There was Michael at 8, grinning with missing front teeth, holding the Father's Day gift he'd made for Robert, a wooden box he'd painted himself, still sitting on my dresser at their house. Michael at 16, awkward in his prom tuxedo, blushing as I pinned on his boutonniere. His college graduation, his arm around me, both of us beaming with pride. The wedding photos were the worst. I'd spent 18 months helping plan that wedding, hand-addressing invitations, making centerpieces to save money. In every picture, I looked so happy, so proud to be gaining a daughter, Sarah in her white dress, promising to love and cherish my son, while apparently already calculating my worth in insurance dollars. Michael's speech at the reception, thanking me for being the best mother a son could ask for, raising his champagne glass while guests wiped away tears. Lies. All lies. Benjamin's drawing, crumpled in my purse, destroyed me completely. He'd made it the day before my fall, a stick figure family with Grandma written in green crayon, standing next to a carefully drawn garden. "That's you and your tomatoes," he'd explained proudly. Would he remember me when Sarah and Michael disappeared to Florida? Would they tell him his grandmother died, or just that she went away? Would he grow up believing I'd abandoned him? The sobs came harder now, my body shaking with them, sending shooting pains through my hip. A night nurse came in, her face kind with concern. "Mrs. Morrison, are you in pain? I can increase your medication." But there was no medication for a broken heart, no surgery to repair a shattered faith in humanity. The morning of February 28th brought an unexpected visitor and an even more unexpected transformation. Nurse Catherine, who worked the night shift, slipped into my room just as her shift was ending. She was young, maybe 30, with kind brown eyes that reminded me of my daughter Linda at that age. She pulled the visitor's chair close to my bed and spoke in hushed tones. "Mrs. Morrison, I need to tell you something. I've been a nurse for 8 years, and I know the difference between fall injuries and something else." She paused, checking the doorway. "Your bruising pattern isn't consistent with falling forward downstairs. The impact marks on your back suggest you were pushed. Hard." I stared at her, tears welling up. Finally, someone believed what I hadn't even been able to properly articulate. "You know?" I whispered. "I suspected, but last night confirmed it. Your daughter-in-law was here after visiting hours. I heard her on the phone in the hallway thinking she was alone. She mentioned insurance money and timeline concerns. She said, and I quote, 'The old bat is tougher than we thought, but she can't last forever.'" Catherine pulled out her phone. I recorded it. Not admissible in court, probably, but it's something. "Mrs. Morrison, you need to fight back. Elder abuse is a felony, and attempted murder is worse." I shook my head, still trapped in my grief. "My son. Michael knows. He's part of it. How can I send my own son to prison?" Catherine leaned forward, her voice fierce. "How can he send his own mother to her grave? You raised him better than this. Would your late husband want you to give up?" Robert. The mention of him sparked something deep inside me. I could almost hear his voice, the way he'd coached me through difficult parent conferences with troubled students. "Janet, honey, you're stronger than you know. Sometimes love means holding people accountable for their actions." "I don't know where to start," I admitted. "I can barely move. They have power of attorney documents, forged but official looking. Who would believe me over them?" Catherine smiled, a conspirator's grin. "You'd be surprised how many people already suspect something's wrong. Mrs. Chen from next door has been calling the hospital daily asking questions. Your nephew David has been investigating, and Dr. Martinez, your attending physician, has been documenting inconsistencies in your injury pattern. You're not alone in this." She was right. I'd been so focused on my pain and betrayal that I'd missed the network of support forming around me. The physical therapist who'd whispered, "Stay strong," during our sessions. The social worker who'd given me her direct number, just in case. The security guard who'd started checking on me more frequently after overhearing Sarah's harsh words. "What would your grandchildren want?" Catherine asked gently. "Do you want them raised by people capable of this? Tommy, Jessica, and Benjamin. My precious grandchildren being raised by a gambling addict and a man who'd chosen money over morality. They deserved better. They deserved the truth, even if it was ugly. They deserved a chance at growing up with actual values, not the hollow performance of family that Sarah and Michael were selling." I thought about my students over the years, how I'd taught them to stand up to bullies, to report abuse, to seek help when they needed it. How many times had I said, "There's no shame in asking for help. There's no weakness in standing up for what's right." Yet here I was, not practicing what I'd preached for 3 decades. Something shifted inside me. like a bone settling back into place. The tears stopped. My jaw set with determination I hadn't felt since the day Robert died, and I'd decided to keep living for my family. Well, now I'd keep living for justice. "Catherine," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks, "I want to fight back. I want my son and his wife to face consequences. But more than that, I want my grandchildren safe. What do I do?" Catherine squeezed my hand. "First, we get you a lawyer who specializes in elder abuse. Then we document everything. And Mrs. Morrison?" She stood to leave, her shift over but her mission just beginning. "We make sure they never hurt anyone else again." As she left, I reached for the notepad on my bedside table. My hands were shaky but determined. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Evidence for prosecution." The victim was done crying. It was time for justice. The plan came together like one of my old lesson plans, methodical, detailed, and designed for maximum impact. Attorney Margaret Stone, whom David had contacted on my behalf, was a 65-year-old former prosecutor who specialized in elder abuse cases. She walked into my hospital room on March 3rd wearing a navy suit and carrying a briefcase that looked like it meant business. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, settling into the visitor's chair, "I've reviewed the preliminary information. Your daughter-in-law made several critical mistakes. Criminals usually do when they think their victims are helpless." She pulled out a legal pad. "Now, let's build a case that will destroy them in court." The first step was evidence gathering. Catherine had been invaluable, switching her shifts to nights when Sarah preferred to visit, thinking I'd be too drugged to remember. We set up a recording system using my grandson Tommy's old smartphone, which he'd left in my purse weeks ago after I'd helped him upgrade. Catherine would activate the voice recorder app and slip it under my pillow whenever Sarah arrived. The woman who thought she was so clever began confessing to an audience she never knew existed. "Marcus is getting impatient," Sarah said during one recorded visit. "But once we have the insurance money, we'll be gone. Michael's already looking at accounting jobs in Miami under his new identity." Every word was evidence. Every confession was another nail in their coffin. Mrs. Chen became our external spy. She started a neighborhood watch journal, documenting every suspicious activity at the house. She photographed Marcus's BMW, captured images of Sarah loading suitcases into her car, and even managed to overhear and record an argument between Sarah and Michael in the backyard about finishing what we started. The private investigator Margaret hired, a retired police detective named Frank Rodriguez, uncovered the full extent of their financial crimes. The second mortgage had been taken out using forged documents, but Sarah had been sloppy. She'd signed my name differently than I ever did, forgetting that I always included my middle initial. The notary who'd supposedly witnessed it was Marcus's cousin, a connection that would prove devastating in court. Frank also discovered something that made my blood run cold, but strengthened our case. Sarah had purchased a life insurance policy on me 6 months ago without my knowledge, using forged documents. She was paying premiums on a $1 million policy from a different company, doubling her potential payout. The greed was astounding. Dr. Martinez agreed to provide expert testimony about my injuries being inconsistent with an accidental fall. He'd already documented everything meticulously, noting that the bruising pattern suggested a two-handed push with significant force. The angle of my hip fracture was also suspicious. It indicated I'd been turning away from the stairs when pushed, not facing forward as I would have been if I'd simply tripped. The masterstroke came from Benjamin, innocently. During a visit with the children, Sarah had to maintain appearances. He mentioned seeing Mommy practice pushing something heavy down the stairs the week before my fall. She had a big bag of potatoes, he said, playing with his toy cars on my hospital bed. She said it was for exercise, but it looked weird. Margaret's eyes lit up when I told her. Premeditation. She was practicing the crime. We needed Sarah to feel safe, to believe her plan was working. So I played the part of the dying old woman. When Michael visited, I kept my eyes closed. my breathing shallow. I let them hear what they wanted from the nurses, that my recovery was uncertain and I might need permanent care. Margaret had the medical staff briefing adjusted to support our narrative while keeping my actual improving condition confidential. The trap was set for March 15th. Margaret had arranged for a family meeting at the hospital about my transition to long-term care. What Sarah and Michael didn't know was that the meeting would include not just medical staff, but also Detective Patricia Williams from the Elder Abuse Unit, the district attorney's office, and uniformed officers waiting in the adjoining room. "We'll let them incriminate themselves one more time," Margaret explained, "in front of witnesses and officials. Their arrogance will be their downfall." I practiced my part, the confused, helpless elderly woman who couldn't quite remember what happened. Meanwhile, my testimony was already recorded on video, clear and damning, safely in Margaret's office. The hammer was raised. All that remained was to let it fall. March 15th arrived with unusual spring warmth, the kind that makes people believe in fresh starts and new beginnings. How ironic that it would be the day of endings for Sarah and Michael. The hospital conference room had been carefully prepared under the guise of a care planning meeting. The long oak table was surrounded by chairs that would soon hold witnesses to the complete unraveling of a conspiracy. I was wheeled in at exactly 2:00 p.m., playing my part perfectly. My hair was disheveled, my eyes unfocused, and I mumbled incoherently when the nurse asked if I was comfortable. Catherine had helped me practice this performance, though it hurt my pride to appear so diminished. The small microphone taped under my hospital gown felt like armor, a reminder that I wasn't actually helpless. Sarah arrived first, dressed in a conservative black dress that she probably thought appropriate for discussing her mother-in-law's decline. She kissed my forehead with lips that felt like ice, whispering, "Don't worry, Janet. We'll take good care of you." The threat in her sweetness was unmistakable. Michael came minutes later, his face drawn with what looked like genuine exhaustion. For a moment, my resolve wavered. He looked so much like Robert when he was stressed. The same line between his eyebrows, the same way of rubbing his jaw. Then he spoke, and the illusion shattered. "How much longer do we have to wait? I have a meeting with the real estate agent at 4. Already planning to sell my home out from under me." The room gradually filled with what Sarah and Michael believed were hospital administrators. Dr. Martinez sat at the head of the table, flanked by a woman introduced as the care coordinator, actually Detective Williams in plain clothes, and a man presented as the insurance liaison, Assistant District Attorney James Parker. Margaret Stone was there as my legal representative, which raised Michael's eyebrows but didn't seem to concern him overly. "Thank you all for coming," Dr. Martinez began, his voice professional and neutral. "We're here to discuss Mrs. Morrison's transition to long-term care and the associated logistics." Sarah leaned forward eagerly. "We've already researched facilities. Golden Years Nursing Home has availability immediately." I knew that place, the cheapest, most negligent facility in the state, recently cited for health violations. "That won't be necessary," Margaret interjected smoothly. "Mrs. Morrison has made her preferences known." Michael's jaw tightened. "My mother isn't capable of making decisions right now as her power of attorney—" "About that," Margaret said, producing a folder, "we've had some questions about the documentation. The signature on these forms doesn't match Mrs. Morrison's official signatures on file with the bank." The color drained from Sarah's face. "That's ridiculous. Janet signed those papers months ago. She's just confused now because of the fall." "The fall," Detective Williams repeated, finally dropping her disguise as she pulled out her badge. "Yes, let's discuss that fall. Mrs. Morrison, do you remember what happened?" This was my cue. I lifted my head slowly, letting my eyes focus with deliberate clarity. "I remember everything," I said, my voice strong and clear, watching their faces transform from confusion to horror. "I remember you pushing me, Sarah. I remember the planning, the practice runs with potato sacks, the insurance policies you took out without my knowledge. Michael stood abruptly. "This is insane! Mom, you hit your head!" "Sit down, Mr. Morrison," Detective Williams commanded. Two uniformed officers entered the room, positioning themselves by the door. "We have extensive evidence, including recordings of your wife discussing the conspiracy." Sarah's carefully constructed composure cracked. "You were unconscious. You were drugged." "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "I was collecting evidence. Every visit, every confession, every threat, all recorded." Catherine entered then, wheeling in a small TV monitor. "Would you like to hear yourself discussing Marcus and the gambling debts? Or perhaps the part where you celebrated that my hip was broken worse than you'd planned?" The room was electric with tension. Michael had gone pale, his hands shaking. "Mom, please!" "Don't," I cut him off, my voice sharp with pain that had nothing to do with my hip. "Don't you dare call me Mom. A son doesn't forge his mother's signature. A son doesn't plan to steal her life savings. A son doesn't stand by while his wife attempts murder." Margaret opened her laptop, projecting documents onto the wall. The forged signatures, the falsified insurance applications, Sarah's gambling records, Michael's embezzlement trail. The evidence mounted like a tsunami, each piece building on the last. Mrs. Chen was brought in via video call, testifying about what she'd observed. Frank Rodriguez presented his findings about Marcus and the Florida connection. The final blow came when Marcus himself walked in, handcuffed, having been arrested that morning. He'd flipped immediately when faced with conspiracy charges, eager to testify against Sarah in exchange for a plea deal. Sarah stood, her designer purse clutched like a shield. "I want a lawyer." "Excellent idea," Attorney Parker said, standing as well. "Sarah Morrison and Michael Morrison, you're under arrest for attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud." As the officers moved forward with handcuffs, Michael looked at me with desperate eyes. "I'm your son," he pleaded. The handcuffs clicked around Michael's wrists with a sound that echoed through the conference room like a judge's gavel. But Sarah wasn't going down quietly. As Detective Williams reached for her arms, she exploded into a rage that revealed the real woman beneath the suburban housewife facade. "You manipulative old witch!" she screamed at me, her face contorted with fury. "We gave you a home. We took care of you. You should be grateful." She turned to the room wildly. "She's lying. She's always been jealous of me, trying to turn Michael against me. Check her medical records. Dementia runs in her family." "Actually," Dr. Martinez interjected calmly, "Mrs. Morrison's cognitive tests show exceptional mental acuity for her age. We ran multiple evaluations after her injury. She's sharper than most people half her age." Sarah's designer. Bag fell to the floor, spilling its contents. Among the lipstick and credit cards was a small glass vial that caught everyone's attention. Detective Williams picked it up carefully with gloved hands. "What's this, Mrs. Morrison?" Sarah's face went white. "Vitamins," she said quickly. Too quickly. "We'll have it tested," Williams said, bagging it as evidence. Later analysis would reveal it was a powerful sedative, the same type that had been showing up in my blood tests, medication I'd never been prescribed. But the real shock came when Michael finally spoke, his voice breaking. "Mom, I need you to know something." He looked at his wife, then back at me. "I didn't know about the push. I swear to God I didn't know she was planning that." Sarah whirled on him. "Shut up, Michael. Shut your mouth right now." But Michael continued, tears streaming down his face. "I knew about the money problems. I knew about the gambling. I even knew about the insurance policies. But I thought we were just going to convince you to move to assisted living, to sell the house legitimately. When you fell, when she pushed you, I suspected, but I couldn't believe." He choked on his words. "I chose to believe her because I'm a coward, because facing the truth meant admitting I married a monster." "You pathetic fool," Sarah snarled. "You knew exactly what needed to happen. You said yourself she'd never agree to sell the house. You said the only way was if something happened to her." The room went silent. Michael's face crumbled completely. "I was venting. I was frustrated. I never meant—" "You meant every word," Sarah shot back viciously. "Stop pretending to be innocent. You helped forge those documents. You watched me practice with those potato sacks and said nothing. You're as guilty as I am." Margaret had been recording everything on her phone. "Please continue," she said dryly. "This confession is extremely helpful." It was then that Tommy, Jessica, and Benjamin walked in with David, my nephew. I'd asked him to bring them at precisely 2:45, knowing the arrests would be complete. The children needed to see their parents' true faces, as painful as it would be. They deserved the truth. "Daddy?" Jessica's voice was small, confused. "Why are you wearing those?" She pointed at the handcuffs. Michael's face went from pale to green. "Jessica, sweetheart, your parents committed serious crimes," Detective Williams said gently but firmly. "They hurt your grandmother and stole money that wasn't theirs." Tommy, my bright 12-year-old, understood immediately. His face hardened as he looked at his parents. "You pushed Grandma down the stairs?" The question was directed at his mother, but his eyes moved between both parents. "You tried to kill her for money." Sarah attempted damage control. "Tommy, baby, you don't understand." "I understand enough," Tommy said, moving to stand beside my wheelchair. He took my hand protectively. "I heard you on the phone with that Marcus guy. I heard you talking about insurance money. I thought I was misunderstanding, but—" His voice broke. "You're monsters, both of you." Jessica began to cry, and Benjamin, too young to fully grasp the situation, but understanding enough to know his world was crumbling, ran to me, climbing carefully into my lap despite my injuries. "Grandma, are you okay? Did Mommy really hurt you?" I held him close, my own tears falling. "I'm going to be okay, sweetheart. And so are you. I promise." The twist came when Detective Williams revealed one more piece of information. "Mrs. Sarah Morrison, you should know that Marcus Lewis has provided us with additional information. The casino debts you claimed. They were partially fabricated. You've been funneling money to an offshore account for 2 years, preparing to leave your family regardless of this insurance scheme." Michael's head snapped up. "What?" Williams continued ruthlessly. "The Florida plans didn't include your husband, Mr. Morrison. She was planning to divorce you once she had the insurance money and leave with Mr. Lewis. You were just another mark in her con." The betrayal on Michael's face was absolute. He'd sacrificed his mother for a woman who was planning to abandon him anyway. The irony was bitter and complete. As the officers led them out, Sarah in defiant silence and Michael in broken sobs, I heard him say one last thing. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." But sorry wouldn't undo the months of pain, the betrayal, or the stairs I'd tumbled down. Sorry was just another word, as empty as his promises to love and honor family. 6 months later, I stood in the garden of my new home, watching Benjamin carefully water the tomato plants we'd grown from seeds. The house was smaller than Michael's, a cozy 3-bedroom rancher with a single story, deliberately chosen to avoid any stairs. But it was mine, purchased with the settlement from the various insurance fraud cases and the sale of Michael's house, which had reverted to me once the fraudulent second mortgage was voided. The trial had been swift and decisive. Sarah was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for attempted murder, elder abuse, insurance fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The judge, a stern woman named Helen Crawford, had called it one of the most egregious cases of familial betrayal she'd ever presided over. Sarah had shown no remorse, even claiming at sentencing that I'd exaggerated my injuries for sympathy. The security footage from Mrs. Chen's house, showing Sarah practicing with weighted sacks, had been particularly damning. Michael received 8 years, though his cooperation and genuine horror at the full extent of Sarah's plans had earned him a lighter sentence than the prosecution initially sought. He'd written me 17 letters from prison, each one more desperate than the last, begging for forgiveness. I'd read them all but answered none. Forgiveness might come someday, but that day wasn't today. Some betrayals cut too deep for easy absolution. The real victory, though, was sitting at my kitchen table right now, doing homework. I'd been granted full custody of all 3 children after a family court judge reviewed the evidence. Tommy, now 13, had become fiercely protective of his siblings and me. He'd started seeing a therapist to process the trauma, and while there were still hard days, he was learning to separate his parents' actions from his own worth. "Grandma," Jessica called from inside, "can you help me with this math problem?" "Coming, sweetheart," I replied, but Benjamin tugged my hand. "Grandma, look!" He pointed proudly at the small green tomatoes forming on the vine. "We grew those, from just tiny seeds." "We did," I agreed, ruffling his hair. "Sometimes the best things come from starting over." Mrs. Chen had become like family, joining us for Sunday dinners and teaching the children to make dumplings. She'd testified at the trial with quiet dignity, explaining how she'd suspected something was wrong for months, but hadn't known how to help until it was almost too late. "In China," she'd told the court, "we have a saying, 'The tree wants to be still, but the wind keeps blowing.' Janet wanted peace, but evil wouldn't let her rest." My hip had healed, though I still used a cane on cold days. The physical therapy had been grueling, but Catherine, who'd become a dear friend, had visited twice a week, encouraging me through the worst of it. She'd been promoted to head nurse of her department, partly due to the commendation she'd received for her role in exposing the abuse. Patricia and Linda had rallied around me once they learned the truth. They'd been horrified that I'd protected Michael initially, but they understood the complex grief of watching your child become someone unrecognizable. We'd grown closer through the ordeal, speaking weekly and visiting monthly. Linda's husband, despite his Parkinson's diagnosis, had insisted on helping me move into the new house, saying family had to stick together when it really counted. The children were benefiting from the life insurance policy I'd maintained, the legitimate one, which I'd restructured into education trusts. They'd go to college debt-free, something Sarah and Michael could never have provided given their financial disasters. I'd also started a small fund for other elder abuse victims, named after Robert, the Robert Morrison Justice Fund. Marcus had gotten 5 years in deportation afterward, his testimony against Sarah only buying him so much leniency. The gambling establishment Sarah owed money to had been investigated, leading to a larger federal case about predatory lending practices. In an ironic twist, Sarah's criminal activities had helped expose and shut down a major illegal gambling ring. As I helped Jessica with her fractions, I thought about the stairs that had changed everything. Those 23 steps had nearly killed me, but they'd also led to freedom. Freedom from manipulation, from false love, from the prison of denial I'd built around my son's true nature. The doorbell rang, and Tommy went to answer it. It was David, my nephew, arriving for our weekly legal review. He'd been instrumental in ensuring all the financial crimes were properly unwound and that the children's futures were secure. He entered with a smile and a box of cookies from the children's favorite bakery. "Aunt Janet, you're looking wonderful," he said, and meant it. The woman who'd been broken at the bottom of the stairs had climbed back up, stronger for the falling. That evening, as I tucked Benjamin into bed in his new room, decorated with the space theme he loved, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Grandma, will Mommy and Daddy ever come back?" I sat on his bed, choosing my words carefully. "They'll be away for a long time, sweetheart. They did something very bad, and they need to face the consequences." "But you'll stay with us?" I kissed his forehead, breathing in his little boy smell of sunshine and dirt from the garden. "Forever and always, I promise." And unlike his parents' promises, mine would be kept. The morning sun streamed through my kitchen window as I prepared breakfast for the children, just as I had every morning for the past 6 months. But this particular morning was different. It marked exactly 1 year since the day Sarah pushed me down those stairs. As I flipped pancakes for Benjamin, still shaped like Mickey Mouse because some traditions are worth keeping, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. Trust, I've learned, isn't something you inherit along with your grandmother's china or your father's eyes. It's earned through countless small acts of reliability, through showing up when it matters, through choosing someone's well-being over your own comfort or gain. My son had been born from my body, raised with my values, loved with every fiber of my being, and yet when tested, his integrity crumbled like sand. Meanwhile, strangers like Catherine and neighbors like Mrs. Chen had shown me more genuine care than my own blood. The investigation had revealed something that still chills me. I wasn't Sarah's first victim. Her previous elderly employer in another state had died from a suspicious fall 5 years ago, though it was ruled accidental at the time. The case has been reopened. How many others might have suffered in silence without the support system that saved me? This thought haunts me, but it also drives me. The fund I established has already helped 3 other elderly victims find legal representation and safe housing. Tommy came downstairs first, as usual, already dressed for school. At 13, he'd aged beyond his years, but his therapist assured me he was processing everything in healthy ways. Morning. "Grandma," he said, pouring orange juice for his siblings without being asked. The trial had forced him to grow up quickly, but it had also taught him about standing up for what's right, even when it's family you're standing against. "Tommy," I said as he sat down to eat, "I'm proud of you. You know that, right?" He nodded, his eyes, so like Michael's but hopefully containing more steel, meeting mine. "I'm proud of you too, Grandma, for fighting back, for not giving up on us." Jessica bounced in next, her ballet bag slung over her shoulder. She'd started dance again last month, finally feeling secure enough to resume normal activities. "Grandma, Sophia's mom wants to know if I can sleep over Saturday. Can I? Please?" "We'll discuss it after school," I said, but my smile told her yes. These normal childhood moments felt like victories, proof that trauma doesn't have to define you forever. Family, I've come to understand, isn't just about blood relations. It's about the people who stand by you when standing by you is hard. It's Mrs. Chen, who testified despite her fear of getting involved. It's Catherine, who risked her job to help me. It's David, who spent countless hours untangling the legal mess. It's even the prosecutor who cried during closing arguments, moved by the betrayal I'd suffered. These people, bound to me by choice rather than genetics, had shown me what family really means. Greed, that ancient poison, had infected my son and his wife like a disease, turning them into people capable of attempted murder. They'd valued money over morality, comfort over compassion, their desires over my life. Sarah's gambling addiction was just a symptom of a deeper rot, the belief that you deserve what others have worked for, that your needs justify any cruelty. She'd seen my life insurance not as a safety net for my grandchildren, but as a lottery ticket she could cash in early. The children finished breakfast and gathered their school things. As I walked them to the bus stop, slowly with my cane, but steadily, Benjamin held my free hand. "Grandma," he said, his 6-year-old wisdom surprising me as always, "I'm glad you're tough." "Why's that, sweetheart?" "Because bad people thought you were weak, but you showed them. You're like the superhero in my comics. You got knocked down but got back up stronger." If only he knew how many nights I'd wanted to give up, how many times I'd nearly dropped the charges just to make it all go away. But looking at him, at all 3 of them, I knew every moment of pain had been worth it. They deserved to grow up knowing that actions have consequences, that justice exists, that victims can become victors. Some of you watching might have parents or grandparents you're taking for granted. Some might even be planning something dark, thinking the elderly are easy targets, too weak or confused to fight back. Let me tell you something. We're not. We've survived decades of life's hardships. We've buried spouses, raised children, built careers, and weathered storms you can't imagine. We're not victims waiting to happen. We're people with rights, dignity, and often more fight in us than you'd expect. And for those of you who might be suffering in silence, who suspect your family members are plotting against you but feel too afraid or ashamed to act, please seek help. Call Elder Protective Services. Talk to a trusted friend. Document everything. Your life is worth more than keeping family secrets. Your safety matters more than avoiding confrontation. What would you do if your own family betrayed you for money? Would you have fought back like I did? Or would you have stayed silent to protect the family image? Would you have found the strength to stand up in court and testify against your own child? There's no easy answer, and I pray you never have to find out. But if you do find yourself at the bottom of those stairs, literally or figuratively, remember this: getting back up isn't just possible, it's powerful. Justice isn't just an ideal, it's achievable. And family isn't just who you're born to, it's who stands by you when you're broken and helps you heal. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know experienced elder abuse? What signs should we watch for? How can we better protect our vulnerable loved ones? And if this story touched you, please share it with others. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone, that survival is possible, that even the worst betrayal can lead to a better tomorrow. Remember to like and subscribe for more stories of courage, justice, and the unbreakable human spirit. Because everyone deserves to know that no matter how far you fall, you can always rise again.